Welcome to the Mental Mastery Show, where your host, Max Wigan, interviews world-leading experts from sports, business, and psychology on what it takes to unleash your potential and master your mind. Let the show begin.
Welcome back to another episode of Mental Mastery. I'm so excited for this interview today because today I'm talking to one of the most inspiring human beings I've ever had the pleasure of getting to know. Self-proclaimed professional patient Derek Fitzgerald. After years of struggling with severe health issues, Derek became the only person ever to finish a full distance Ironman after surviving both cancer and a heart transplant. And so I'm super excited to dive deep today into overcoming life's biggest struggles, dealing with massive amounts of pain, and never giving up. I hope you enjoy it, guys. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm really so grateful to have you. Like I shared with you before, it's just such a pleasure to talk to you because, you know, on this show we've had Olympic champions, we've had world record holders, we've had all these elite athletes, best-selling authors, scientists, whatever, all these sort of heroes for me. And your story, I think, ranks among the best, if not the best, when it comes to just being able to overcome setback after setback after setback and still keep going again and again and again. And so I'm just so grateful to have you today because for all our listeners, this is a guy that really is to me the real deal, right? Has really overcome just traumas and pain and obstacles over and over and over again. And so for you listeners, was he an athlete or was he an entrepreneur or mom or dad, whatever obstacles that you're facing, you can definitely learn something from this man about what it really takes to get through those hard times in life and overcome them and get better on the other side of it. So Derek, welcome to the show. Super excited to have you today.
Thanks for having me, Max.
Now, for those listeners that don't know you yet, can you share a little bit more about your backstory and really what has led you to this point today?
Wow. Okay. So backstory is that I grew up in a very average life. I had no inclinations of the medical issues that I'd faced later in my life. And so when I was 30, I was diagnosed with cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so I went through chemotherapy. Through the process of chemotherapy, they cured my cancer, but through the toxins that they were flooding my body in the chemotherapy, they damaged my heart. I went through 7 years of heart failure until the point where I was asleep 23 out of 24 hours a day. And then almost 9 years ago now, I received a heart transplant. I was not active. I had been active up until high school and a little bit of college, but between college and the time I was diagnosed with cancer when I was 30, I had become overweight, obese. So I started atrophying as I was waiting for my heart transplant. So I went from over 200 pounds prior to my heart transplant down to 128 pounds after my heart transplant. I was skin and bone. And went from transplant to a slow progression of coming back to a level of health. And then once I regained a level of health, I found a level of athleticism and became the first and to this point only cancer surviving heart transplant recipient to ever finish a full distance Ironman.
Yeah, that's honestly just such an incredible story. And to me, the part that really sticks out is you didn't even start athletics until after you'd gone through all of these health challenges, right? And it's like one of the most incredible things.
My very first 5K race, my very first 5K run was 8 months after my heart transplant.
Wow. So was that something like in those hard times when you were struggling so much with your health? Was that already in your mind, like, hey, once I overcome this, then I'm gonna, go into athletics, I'm gonna start running? Or was it more like you overcame it and then it sort of started like to gradually come to you?
No, when I was sick, all I was doing was trying to hold on and trying to, I know that nothing is promised in life, not even tomorrow, nothing is a guarantee. So I was just holding on, and every time I opened my eyes, I was happy. Every time I woke up from being asleep, I was like, all right, well, I'm still here. So the fact that I was able to go through all of that, and then once I got the heart transplant, it was a slow progression. I mean, the whole first month after my heart transplant, I was so atrophied and so weak that I spent the month just trying to lift my head from my pillow just about an inch.
Wow.
And that was how training started. Humble beginnings, to say the least. And then as I was recovering, my coworkers sent me a movie prop replica from the movie Ironman.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was the arc reactor from Tony Stark's heart that was in like a little plexiglass box. And it was kind of like proof that Derek has a heart. And I thought, Iron Man, isn't that some kind of race or something?
No way.
And then as a gift to myself and my family, after I got the heart transplant, we decided to go to Kona, Hawaii, the Big Island. And when I got there, I realized, oh, that whole Ironman thing, they do that here. So it was, I stumbled into being an athlete. It was more about just being so thankful to be alive and being grateful to this person out there, this stranger that donated their heart on their last day of their life to a complete stranger. I want to honor that person. And so the best way that I could figure out how to do that was to be the best caretaker, the best custodian of my body that I possibly could to take care of this person's gift. So it's been a progression where it's gone quickly. I mean, I went from 5K to Ironman in 2 years' time.
Yeah, I mean, that is just ridiculous, honestly.
Yeah, basically heart transplant to Ironman in roughly 2.5 years, 5K.
Wow, yeah.
Ironman, a little less than that. So it wasn't overnight, but it seemed like it. It was a very steep learning curve. But for me, all I asked of myself was just to be a little bit better than I was the day before. And if you just keep doing that, that adds up.
Yeah, that really seems to be your mantra, right? Just like every day doing your best you can because you never really guarantee the next day, right? So,
Exactly.
Yeah, is that really something that you learned during that process of recovery, during that process of never really knowing, am I going to wake up again tomorrow? Like you speak with so much gratitude for that time, right? Which I find really interesting. Is that like you constantly mention like how grateful you are for that period and like the lessons that you've learned.
Absolutely. I mean, I think going through the struggle has given me a perspective on life that I don't think I would have had if I hadn't gone through it. It's definitely made me a better person, and it has afforded me a perspective on life that I used to be a workaholic. I used to work 20 hours a day, and I was happy to do it. And I would wake up the next day, and if I wasn't working, then I thought I was wasting time.
Oh, yeah.
Now it's like, you know what? If I'm not enjoying life and spending time with my loved ones and, you know, telling people I love them and all those things that truly matter, then I feel like I'm missing out.
Amen to that for sure. And that's I think such an important point that we're always missing, right? When we're getting so caught up in the constant struggle towards our goals, right? Whatever they may be, that we forget that like the point of life is to actually live it, right? It's to actually enjoy the process of just waking up every day and loving whatever it is you do, right? Because I see so many people just slaving away in jobs that they hate or studies that they hate or whatever it is. And they never actually take the time to actually appreciate today, right? I always like, hey, in 3 years, once I graduate college, right? Or like once I make the money, then I'll be happy, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I actually had a mantra that I used to repeat to myself, and I thought it was pretty clever, but it wasn't. But back when I was working, I was doing really well. I was a successful entrepreneur, and I had this mantra of I'm going to work hard enough, long enough to make enough money to do all the things in life that money can't buy. And really, I was just I was postponing and delaying living life to work to make more money so that I can enjoy life. It just made no sense.
Yeah, it's just like having it all backward, right?
Right, exactly. And while I did make a lot of money, in the end, I died. I mean, I physically died a couple times. And I was stubborn. I'm still stubborn, but it took dying twice to make me realize that I was a complete idiot, and that I needed to live life. I needed to make the most of today. Don't put off things until tomorrow that you can do today, and enjoy this time that we have.
For sure, for sure. And I think that's such an important lesson. And really what it reminds me of is just actually making this conscious decision, right? Because most of us don't really decide like, hey, I'm gonna have like a great day today, right? We just kind of like go through the day, right? It's like the same days yesterday and the week before and the month before, right? But like actually like deciding deliberately that, hey, today is gonna be a great day because it's like it's really the only chance I have to live, right? I think that's
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, absolutely. We have right now. And there's been a lot of people that have come up to me and they say, Derek, I mean, you have somebody else's heart beating in your chest. What's the guarantee that it's going to work until tomorrow? I mean, that thing could go at any time, right?
Yeah.
And I said, well, yeah. And they're like, well, what's it like knowing that you could die at any moment? I'm like, I don't know. How does it feel for you? You know,
I
because
love that.
are you the one with the guarantee? Because I don't have that guarantee. I don't know anybody that has that guarantee.
Yeah.
Any of us could walk out across the street and get, hit by a bus.
Hmm.
They're horrible things, but it's a perspective on the reality of our lives that I was forced into the realization of. And unfortunately, I went through a period of around 7 years where everything I thought I loved to do, that I thought made me who I was, all of that was slowly taken away from me when I became more and more sick, until I was propped up in a hospital bed, like I said, asleep for 23 hours a day, not able to do anything. Most of my friends and family were gathered by my bedside, holding my hand, not know, and I didn't know that they were there.
Wow.
Everything was taken away from me until I was just a husk, and I was a shell. I called it death by attrition. Everything that I knew and loved was slowly taken away from me. So it's a horrible way to die. And it gave me the opportunity to realize the error in my ways. I'm so thankful that I survived all that, because now I know. I mean, the way I used to think was complete nonsense, and I've made it a point to live life every day now. It's a conscious decision to get the most out of every day as I possibly can. And when my head hits the pillow, I know if I don't wake up tomorrow, I'm good with that. I lived the best I could.
Wow. Yes. So take us back to that moment when you're lying in hospital bed. Like, where did your thoughts go? Like, what did you reflect on? Was it just like, I mean, I bet you were in incredible amounts of pain, right? Incredible amounts of suffering during that time. But like, did you
Yeah,
just consciously reflect on life, like the choices that you've made, the values, the sort of decisions, or what did that look like? How do you spend your time just kind of like getting through that time?
quite honestly, I did reflect a lot on life, but especially at the end, before I got the heart transplant, I I was just in such a bad place physically. I was in limbo. I couldn't get up and walk around. The day before my heart transplant, they still hadn't found a heart for me yet at that point. And the nurses would come to my room and say, Derek, we haven't found your heart yet. You've got to get up and you've got to walk. You've got to move. You've got to get your blood circulating through your body because your heart is so weak. And the day before I got my transplant, they helped me out of the bed. They gave me a walker. And so I was, using the old man's shuffle in this hospital hallway. And I couldn't walk 20 feet down that hallway before I just leaned up against the wall. And I said, that's it. I'm done. I'm done. It was in the months leading up to these moments, I knew that my body was in limbo. I wasn't alive. I wasn't dead. And all I wanted was an opportunity. And that opportunity could either be living or dying. I was fine with either one. I wasn't scared of dying, and I was hopeful to live. But I knew I just didn't want to stay in that limbo. It had to be one or the other. I didn't want to spend another day just existing.
For sure. I mean, 7 years is incredibly long time for that, right? To just have that heart failure, right? And not be able to really have certainty around what's going to happen, right? So how did you
Yeah.
deal with that uncertainty also, involving your family and your friends? Like how do you deal with it, or how did your family deal with, just not knowing what was going to happen then?
Everybody was very hopeful, but everybody knew that I was very sick. And so it's a tough time. And you have to go through doing things in your 30s that you never expect to have to do, like writing out what that you own goes to, writing out your will and saying, when I die, if I die, this goes to this person, this goes to this person. And it's just not stuff that you're comfortable doing or prepared to be doing at that time in your life. You're supposed to be in the prime of your life.
Yeah, just enjoying and
right, exactly. And starting a family, or if you haven't started one already, it's, parenting and creating your legacy, kids. I didn't have kids at the time. So it was extremely difficult. I was married to a woman at the time, and she was a saint. All she wanted was a kid. She wanted, and we tried for 13 years to get her pregnant, and it just didn't happen. Now, the crazy thing is that after I got my transplant, and we were in the end stages of our marriage, she got pregnant. So we did end up having a child together. And so now there's this 5-year-old girl, running around and throwing her arms around my neck and calling me daddy. And it's the most beautiful thing in the world. And for my ex-wife and for me both, it's just something to know that there's a part of you that will go on long after we're gone. So it was a difficult time, because at that point, while I was sick, we had no kids. We had a huge black hole of uncertainty around the future of my life. Like I said, I knew going into the process that no one is guaranteed anything, and each day is a gift. And so every day I would go to bed, close my eyes, and say, well, if this is it, I'm okay with that. And then I would wake up the next day and my eyes would open. I'm like, I'm still here. I'm still going.
Still going strong, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. And I have one more day to maybe, I'm not going to figure it out, but maybe one of my doctors can figure out how to save me. And ultimately they did.
They did, yeah.
But you're buying time. You're holding on. I used to visualize it like, I don't know if you have the big, it's a big thing now here in the States, where you go to a gym and they have a huge, heavy rope. And you've got to.
Oh yeah, those. Yeah, I don't know what they're called, but yeah.
You're yanking 2 ropes up and down, and it's a strong rope. It's a heavy rope. It feels like nothing could break it. And I kind of relate it now to, that's what your life force should be. Your connection to life. And you're young and you're strong and you have a strong grip on it. You can tug on it all you want and it's not going anywhere. As I got more and more sick and my conditions became progressively worse and worse through that period of time, I felt that metaphor, that rope, was getting frayed and then losing fibers until it was just a strand. And I was like holding on to it with like 2 fingers, just trying not to let go. And it's jerking all over the place. And I'm flying on the end of it. And there was no control on my side. It was just, I was at the mercy of wherever that rope went. And whenever that rope snapped, I was going with it into nothing. So that was kind of the thought process. And I would just, picture that rope and, I'd wake up each day and go, well, it hasn't snapped yet.
It's still there.
It's still there. I'm still hanging on. I don't know how.
Mm.
And, I would have coughing fits that were so bad. I mean, my heart was not strong enough to pump the fluids out of my lungs. So my lungs were getting more and more filled up. I couldn't even lie down fully, or else I would have drowned in my own body fluids. So when I would have a coughing fit, and I had a lot of coughing fits, I was so weak, I was so frail. At certain points, I thought my spine was going to snap in half.
Gosh.
So, I mean, it wasn't as much what I would call or describe as painful, but it was suffering.
Yeah. I
So,
bet.
yeah, it was just a struggle to breathe.
Struggle to just get through the day. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
And like I said,
Like,
at the end, I was propped up in a bed. There was nothing I could do. I couldn't go
yeah.
anywhere. I couldn't do anything.
Mhm. Now you mentioned legacy before and your daughter. So are those kind of like lessons you actually talk to your daughter about? Is she like, with 5 years, like you mentioned, do you already like sort of start talking about some of these things, or do you think that's something that you're gonna keep for later, maybe when you start sharing some of those lessons, those insights with her?
Well, I think at this point, she definitely knows that I had a heart transplant. And I try to provide her small lessons of perspective that I've learned. I don't lay it on really heavy.
Yeah, of course not.
But I've done a lot of research on my conditions. The Center for Disease Control here in the United States, they have statistics. How many U.S. citizens die from what every year? So number 2 is cancer. Number 1 is heart failure or heart disease. So
I had them combined.
I had them both, one after the next. And during the period that I had both of those, during that same period, just under, I think, 12 million Americans died from either one of them. And there I was, still going.
Yeah.
So for me, being able to survive all that and to come out the other side, I didn't know if the rest of my life was just going to be sitting in a lounge chair watching daytime television. I didn't know what to expect. And by the time I got sick enough that I needed to be hospitalized, I barely knew my name. So I had no expectations of what I was going to experience on the other side. But the fact that I did survive all these things and so many others didn't, and not only have I been able to survive all of it, but do things that the vast majority of the population don't or aren't able to do. I'm actually going to correct myself. I think that they could do it. It's a matter if they want to or not.
Yeah, if they're willing to actually.
Yeah. But it's something that I owe. Every heartbeat that I have right now belongs to someone else. So everything that I do every day, 24 hours a day, has been given to me for almost 9 years now from this complete stranger, running around with a daughter.
Yeah.
So when people here receive an organ transplant, they call it the gift of life. So I received the gift of life, but when I'm dealing with my daughter and I'm talking to my daughter, I say, she's the miracle that occurred, from the gift. And so she knows that she's a miracle, and it's just an amazing thing to see her running around and learning and growing up. So it's just, I'm extremely fortunate beyond anything that I could ever describe.
Yeah, I can definitely see that here, and I'm always so fascinated by this idea of post-traumatic growth, right? So people facing whatever traumas, whatever adversity, whatever setbacks in their lives, and actually coming back stronger, right? Like you mentioned, like you had never been an athlete before, and then you go through all these traumas and all these problems, right? All these health setbacks, and you end up running an Ironman, right? Which is just like totally crazy to like 99.99% of people on this earth. Like it's just totally incredible how you've made that transition. So do you feel like the sort of lessons that you've learned and the mental strength that you've obviously gained over those years, has that helped you sort of transition to athletic life? Like now, for example, like we talked before about, doing an Ironman, like does that somehow help you get through that pain of, running an Ironman, running the last half of a marathon? Like, does that help you in any way, or?
Oh, sure, absolutely. I think that, again, it's perspective. When you break a bone, when it heals, it fuses itself and makes a stronger bone. And when you die, and over the course of almost a decade, and you die a couple times, and you face death every one of those days, it affords you a perspective. And so when I started doing endurance sports, people started describing the experience to me as, oh geez, when you get to a half Ironman, or I'm sorry, when you get to a half marathon, it's gonna feel like you're dying. And I'm like,
You're like, I'm pro at that.
really? Okay, all right, I'll take you up on that. We'll see, right?
Yeah.
And then, when you do your first marathon, oh my God, I mean, when you hit mile 18, it's so difficult. And I'm not saying that it's not difficult. I don't want to make light of any of these endurance sports, and everybody has their own thresholds, and everybody has their own perspectives, and I'm not trying to minimize anything that anyone else has or hasn't gone through. But that being said, what I went through, I enjoy endurance sports because it reminds me. It reminds me of all the feelings that I had when I was sick and I didn't know if I was going to make it through. But at the same time, I know that now when I do endurance sports, it is voluntary. If at any point, at any time, I am too uncomfortable, I can always raise my hand and stop. I can get off the bus. I can, stop running. I can stop. I can just stop. That's not a luxury that you're afforded when you're critically ill. And so I can push myself into places of pain that remind me of where I was, but they will never, ever, ever come close to what it was actually like. What I'm able to do is use endurance sports to remind myself of how I used to be, and then it allows me to, it affords me the gratitude to know that I'm swimming after having survived all these things, and I'm biking after having survived all these things, and I'm running under the sun with all these other people and enjoying life, when the likelihood of me actually being here was so incredibly small.
Yeah, that's so incredible how you really use it to remember how weak you were in the past, right? And I think that's so interesting because so many people they try to sort of suppress trauma, right? They suppress, illnesses, problems, traumas, whatever it is in their life, and they kind of try to forget about it, right? Put it in this little box and hide it in a corner. But you actively remember, and you actively take those things, take those past traumas and hurts and pain, and you remember it with gratitude, right? So was it like something that you did right from the start, or was there ever a time in your life where you kind of try to forget about, all the problems that you had to go through?
I was not this person that you're speaking with today prior to being sick. If I had medical issues, I would push them aside. I would tough it out. I would ignore my body's cues of anything that might be wrong. And I kept working. That was one of the things that almost killed me. Yeah. I am here through the sheer courageous compassion and generosity of another human being. And so I kind of feel like it's my responsibility as someone who survived everything that I have to get to this point. It's my responsibility to give back. And part of that is remembering where I was, remembering what I survived to get to this point. And yeah, it's difficult. Yeah, it brings up a lot of horrible memories, but they become more manageable when you're on this side of them. And the more you talk about them and the more you share with others who've gone through similar experiences, the better it gets. And hopefully, as a survivor, and as part of my responsibility, it's to give back and to let other people know what's possible, that you don't have to accept where you are, that you have the mental capacity to get better, you have the mental capacity to be better than the day you were before. And it's just with those small, incremental, progressive, just developments that allow you to get pretty much anywhere you want to go in your health, in your career, in your life, with your loved one, whatever it is.
Oh, that's such an important point that you're making, right? It's like those small incremental pieces of progress, right? Because you mentioned before how like after you got your heart transplanted, right? You went to watch this Ironman, right? And I assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's when you first had that vision of like, hey, I should do this, right? But you didn't start there, right? Like you didn't start, oh, like let me go for like run a marathon for fun, right?
No, not at all. And that was the other thing. I mean, I started 8 months after my transplant with my very first 5K.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't go and do a marathon after that. Now, 2 months after my first 5K, I did my first half marathon.
Yeah.
So from 8 months to 10 months, I went, I got up to 13.1 miles. And then after I did that, I signed up for my first marathon. And then after I did that, I thought, well, maybe I should try this whole biking, swimming, running thing, or swimming, biking, running thing. And so, yeah, I started with an Olympic distance triathlon in April of 2012. And in May of 2012, a month later, I did my first half Ironman. So like I said, the learning curve was steep.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy fast, even for like someone, quote unquote, typically healthy, right?
Yeah, someone who has all their factory issued parts.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's difficult for anybody, but it's not impossible. And the other thing is that I wasn't going out there trying to win. I was just trying to get out there and get to the starting line. And if anything happened beyond that, it was gravy. Because for me, every day is I'm in the bonus round.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, actually, a couple months back, I got this bracelet and it said "Memento Mori," right? So remember death, and I think that's such an important thing to consider. And oftentimes people look at it like, whoa, this sounds weird, like it sounds kind of sad, depressing, right? But I found that like you mentioned, right, like knowing that we're going to die, and like you said, everyone like might die. Like there's no guarantee for anyone, right? Even if you don't have a heart failure or whatever, there's no guarantee you're gonna wake up again tomorrow, right? There's no guarantee you're gonna survive today and listening to this podcast even, right?
Right.
And so like I found that this is really the only way to actually make sure that like I actually live, right? I actually enjoy today. But just remembering, hey, tomorrow I might be dead, my friends might be dead, my family might be dead. So I've got to live today.
Live right now in this moment and make the most of it. No matter where you are, no matter what life has dealt you, you've got to make the most of what you've got right now. There's a story that I've told a couple times, and I was at a camp for kids who had heart issues since they were born, and they either had heart transplants at that point, or they had pulmonary hypertension. Wow. And so the camp asked me down to speak to them. I had just finished my first Ironman in New York, and so I went down there, and we were all around a campfire, and these kids who had rarely been away from their parents were down in a typical camp setting, and it was amazing to see them kind of grow and flourish in this. But I just finished my story of getting through that first Ironman, and they opened it up for questions, and this one young woman says, well, how do you keep going? And at first I thought she was talking about an Ironman. How do you keep going in an Ironman? But then I looked at her and I realized that she was asking me, how do you keep going in life? Because here's this person, this young woman who had been fighting since she was born to stay alive. And, you know, I wasn't expecting that tough of a question. And it was tough. It was like a punch in the gut when I realized what she was asking. And so I sat down and I said, well, what's going to happen? All right, let's look into a crystal ball, and you find out that you've got 24 hours left to live. What are you going to do? So are you going to run to your bedroom, climb into your bed, pull up your covers to your neck, and cry with, you know, the shades down in the dark until you die 24 hours later? Or are you going to go out there, and are you going to do everything you can to experience and enjoy the time you have left? And I said, so you go to sleep at that point, and for some cosmic, mysterious reason, you wake up the next day. What do you do then? Well, you wake up and you do everything you can to enjoy and experience that day. And then you go to bed that night, and for some reason you wake up the next day and you're still not dead. Well, you keep doing that again and again and again. And slowly, over the course of all these days being added up, you build yourself an amazing life. And that is how you keep going forward. You're not promised anything. No one is. But you have to realize how precious life is, and you've got to make the most of it every day. And if you can do that, and if you can think like that, then you've built an amazing life, one that anybody would be envious of.
Wow, literally, I got the chills right now. That is such an incredible story and such an incredible take on life, right? And I think if we all start applying that really with the mentality of, I got these 24 hours in front of me, how can I maximize my life? How can I just be the best I can be? How can I share the most love, spread the most joy, live the most happiness, right? How can I be my best self? That is such an incredible idea, yeah.
I mean, all those secret wishes, you know, as long as you're not hurting anybody else, but all those those secret wishes that you just put off and say, you know what, I'll never do that. It seems really cool, but I'll never do that. Or all those things that you wanted to tell the barista at your local coffee shop that you've been flirting with for months, but you've never gotten up the nerve to say it. Say it. What's the worst that can happen? You know, so it's all about living the opportunity and taking advantage of every opportunity that you can to live as big as you possibly can for as long as you're allowed to live.
Wow, love that. Yeah, this really speaks to me because about a month ago or so, right, I really reflected on this a lot. And so I ended up writing down this list with like all of the things I wanted to do before I die, right? And I was like, okay, skydiving is on top of the list, right? And literally that day I called, right? And they're like, hey, let me set up an appointment for tomorrow, right? Nice. The next day I went skydiving because I was like, hey, I don't know if like otherwise I'm ever gonna do it, right? And I think that's such an important idea to really just decide that like, hey, right now my life is happening, right? So like if I miss the sunset today, right? Or the sunrise, like I might never see this again, right? And it's such an important thing to just always keep in mind.
You've got to soak it in. And then there's the flip side of that, because that almost ties into the thought of live every day like it's your last.
Yeah.
But the flip side of that, I actually learned from my friend Kyle Garlett. And his point was that when you're experiencing these things and you're living every 24 hours like it's your last day, you've got to experience all of these things as if it's the first time you've ever experienced them. So you've got to experience it like it's your first sunset, your first kiss, the first time you've had your favorite food. Wow. And that's how you savor everything. And that's the lens you've got to look through as you're doing all these things and really take it all in and just go, wow, this just blew my mind. Look at the sky. Look at the sky and how beautiful that is.
Wow, so it's the last time, but also the first time you've ever.
Yeah, and in between seems to be where everybody gets kind of forgets to appreciate everything. It's the beginning and the end that you appreciate it and you experience it like it's the first time you've ever seen it.
Well, I absolutely love that really technique or really idea, right? Of just looking at that. Wow, love that. Now, there, do you have any kind of advice? What's really the biggest piece of advice that you would give to people currently struggling, whether it's with the health, whether it's the personal, professional life, families, doesn't matter. What would be, your one thing that you would share with people on how to get through tough times in life?
Hmm. Uh, one one thing. Now, it just so happens that since my transplant, I've actually started a foundation, and I started the foundation because I was seeing too many of my friends who had been struggling. I saw too many of them pass away, and they are no longer here. And and part of that was the fact that they had either survived an extremely difficult challenge in their health, or they were going through an extremely difficult challenge in their health, but they lost their hold on the mental aspect of staying close to life and the people that make life enjoyable to them. The And a lot of what I do in being physically active, I know it sounds so simple, and I don't want it to seem trite, but if you're able to stay active for as long as you possibly can, and it doesn't have to be an Ironman, it could be walking around the lake with your loved one. It could be it could be anything. But I sat down. I'll just sidestep a little bit. I sat down with a geriatric oncologist for an interview one time, and the question was asked to this geriatric oncologist: how do you define old age? And he said, well, if you go to the government and you ask the government, well, it's very simple. You look, once you're 65 years old, you're technically considered old. But for me, in my practice, how I rate that is I ask people to sit in a chair in my office, then I ask them to stand up and walk 10 feet across the room. The longer it takes them to do that, the shorter their life. And it's not just from the physical perspective of creaky old bones and muscles and joints that don't work anymore. It's the fact that when it takes you that much effort to move, then you move less. And then you start sitting in your chair all day and watching daytime and nighttime TV. And you stop going out to eat with your friends, and you stop talking to the people that make life worth living. And so you start disconnecting mentally and emotionally from this world. And at that point, you're not going to be here much longer because you've got no reason to fight. And the whole point of the foundation is to help people improve their quality of life after a significant health challenge by helping them become more active. And the whole tagline from the foundation is that we're fighting for a life worth fighting for. So by staying active, by staying engaged, it means that we have people that we want to be with. We have things that we want to do. It means that there's a reason for us to stay compliant with our medications. There's a reason for us to do that extra lap around the track, because we don't want to die in our easy chairs watching television. We want to live as much as we can for as long as we can. So as simple as it may seem, stay active as long as you possibly can.
Wow, absolutely love that purpose. So could you share a little bit more about the foundation, where people can find it online? What's the best way to learn more?
Sure. We're up on Recycled Man Foundation, recycledman.com. So where they can find us on the web, or the Recycled Man Foundation on Facebook and Instagram. And then, yeah, so that's just something that we've been putting a lot of time and effort into, and really cheering on those people that have gone through something significant. It doesn't have to be a transplant. It doesn't have to be cancer. It could be a car accident. It could be PTSD. It could be anything. The fact of the matter is that we stay active, we stay engaged with life and the people around us.
Oh, that's such an important thing, I think. Have you read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl?
No.
Oh,
No.
incredible book about this guy that basically survived the horrors of Nazi death camps, right?
Yeah.
And he was a psychiatrist, right? And he saw basically his whole family, his friends being killed by Nazis, right? And like he looked at people, and what he wanted to do is he wanted to find out basically who would survive, right? being trapped for 5 years in a death camp, basically. He was studying people. He was studying human psychology to find out who were the people that actually survived day after day after day, right? That very similar to you, just sort of were just clinging on to life, right? What he found is that basically it was the people that had some kind of purpose, some kind of meaning above themselves, right? So it wasn't people that were just like, hey, I'm caring about themselves and their money or whatever. No, it was like people that wanted to get back to life for their families, right?
Yeah.
People that wanted to get back to life to improve the world, to share their message, whatever it is. So I think it's so important what you guys are doing now, really reconnecting people to that purpose again, to that meaning in life that we get from, like you said, connecting with other people, from actually being active and doing the things that make life worth living, right? So definitely
Exactly.
huge fan of that.
Well, thanks.
For sure. Now, Derek, after completing all of these races, marathons, Ironmans, all that stuff, what's your next big thing? Like, do you have any other crazy stuff planned right now within athletics or business?
Well, I mean, I've been doing a lot more speaking, and so I'm thankful that I'm able to get out there and talk to people and spread the message of hope. But I mean, I'm constantly living a lifestyle of athletics and philanthropy, giving back, because giving back connects me to all the places I've been, and it helps me earn the gifts that I've been given to be able to help others. So I do have Ironman Florida coming up in a month. I'm going to be going to Hawaii next week. Depending on when this comes out, it'll be early to mid-October. I'll be in Hawaii.
Should be up by then, yeah.
Yeah.
So we can see you on.
I won't be racing Kona, but I will be volunteering in there to help others with the Ironman Foundation. That whole thing, I've they're the charitable arm of Ironman. The whole idea behind the Ironman Foundation is to leave behind a tangible impact that's a lasting legacy. And we do that through service projects and grant donations to local charities in the areas in which we race. So I'll be going to Hawaii to do that. And for a race that was such a huge part of my life in Kona, it's going to be an honor to give back to that community.
For sure. Love that.
And then next year, who knows? Maybe it's a triple Ironman.
Triple Ironman. Oh yeah, you could go. What is it, like the longest, like 10-time Ironman or something I read once? It was like some ridiculous stuff, right? Where you just like compete Ironman after Ironman every day. Like that's just.
Or you could be the Iron Cowboy and do 50 Ironmans in 50 states in 50 days.
I mean, that's just beyond crazy, but it gives you stuff to look forward to in the future, right?
Exactly.
Future goals. Now, Derek, on this show, we love to celebrate failure. So do you have a favorite failure in life? Any time that you messed up something, you failed at something, and actually propelled you forward later, it taught you a certain lesson that helped you somehow reach your potential in another way?
It's an interesting question. I do have a hard time with the word failure, because I always feel that failure is an opportunity to learn for your next attempt, and that the only time you fail is when you stop trying. But because it's fresh in my mind, this past Saturday, I competed in Ironman Maryland, and I did not finish. And the time before that was Ironman Lake Placid, and I didn't finish. So I've got 2 back-to-back Ironman races that I have not finished. Now, I was in shape earlier in the year, but then I got hit with one cold and flu and upper respiratory infection after the next. So by the time I got to the starting line of each of those races, I was not prepared. I had not sufficiently trained for either one. Now, Ironman Maryland this past weekend, I was closer to being back in shape, but I got 13 miles from the end of a 140.6 mile race, and I stopped. Now, it was because my heart was not acting right, and obviously that's priority number 1.
Yeah.
But that being said, I mean, it's given me a perspective on the 4th discipline of triathlon. So it's swim, bike, run, and 4th being nutrition. Oh. And so it's given me an opportunity to survive that and see what I can do better to prepare myself for Florida. Thankfully, it's in a month, to make sure that when I do it again, I'm going to be in better shape. not just physically, but I'm going to be fueling my body the right way. And again, that's how I look at failure. It's just an opportunity to learn from something to make you stronger.
I love that take at it, right? And I mean, that is really the only way to grow in life, right? Is to look at those things where like we're not sufficient enough yet, where we're not good enough yet, where we're not skilled enough yet, right? And look and then face that honest question of like, why did I fail, right? Like, what was the thing that was holding me back? Was it a mindset thing, a skill set thing? What was the thing that I didn't do right? And then just because that's the only way to actually grow and do better the next time, right? So I love that.
Absolutely.
Self-awareness part.
And the other thing about that is that knowing going into the situation, like in Placid and Maryland, that I was not sufficiently prepared for the challenge that I was about to embark on, but not to back out, to do it anyway. Mm-hmm. Because in life, you're never prepared for what's going to be thrown at you. You have to deal with the situations with the tools that you have at that moment. You can't say, oh, wait, I don't have time for cancer right now. I don't have time for It's thrown at you and you have to deal with it. That's life. And so for me, I take on these experiences, I take on these challenges, and I know that I'm going to deal with them with every tool that I have, and whether I have to use my mental training or to compensate for a body that's not sufficiently trained, that's what I have to do.
Yeah, that's really so interesting that you actually deliberately seek out these challenges, even though you know you're not actually prepared, right? And like to most people, not being prepared for an Ironman, right? It's just like, it's a crazy thing, right?
It is.
Like most runners I know, they're like, hey, if they're not prepared for a 10K, they won't do it, right? But like an Ironman is just a completely different thing. So
and there's a lot. You just mine the lessons out of each attempt and out of each challenge. And if you don't try, then you rob yourself of the potential of finishing. You rob yourself of all those lessons that you can learn from trying something and coming from behind and trying to figure it out.
Love that. Now, Derek, before I ask my final question, where can listeners connect with you online?
They can connect with me on Recycled Man Speaks on Facebook and Instagram. On Twitter, it's Recycled Man SPKS because they have those characters.
Yeah, I'll link to that.
Yeah, and then there's also recycledmanspeaks.com, and so they can learn about me, my story, how to get in touch with me, all that.
Fantastic, great. Now, final question: what does mental mastery mean to you?
Interesting. I would say that when I think about everything that I've had to overcome, my body it's taken me a long time to realize that I am not my body. I am not the thing that I see when I look in the mirror. For me, it is mastering the mental side of who I am and understanding that what you consider a spirit or a soul or intellect, all these things have nothing to do with my muscles, my bones, my skin, the blood, any of that. And it's knowing that I'm at a place that I can mentally control everything that's going on around me physically, whether it's going through an extremely difficult time in my life and I can take my mind and go someplace else where it doesn't hurt as much, where I can withstand the pain and the suffering, or whether it's now in a race and I can know that what I'm feeling isn't me. It is just what I'm allowing myself to go through. And now, like I said, thankfully, it is something that I have complete control of how much I endure and what I wish to put myself through. And that's a level of mental mastery that I did not have prior to going through what I've been through.
Love that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Max.
That was just amazing. Thank you so much, really.
Thanks for listening to Mental Mastery with your host, Max Weigand. If you liked the show, please make sure to subscribe and check out maxweigand.com for one-on-one coaching and other life-changing resources. Until next time.